Hey everybody, it's Rob Scheer, the host of Fostering Change. And you know what? The fact is that I am so happy that my team picked this one. My friend Mark Daley, that's exactly right. His book Safe, a memoir of fatherhood, foster care, and the risk we take for family. Still one of my favorite books. Absolutely so lucky that because of Mark writing this book, we have become really good friends. I absolutely adore this man and his husband and family. He truly talks about what we all need to be talking about. And I still think if you have not read this book, you need to read this book. Mark, I can't thank you enough. And again, I am so happy that you made the best of because your book is definitely still in the top one of my favorites. Well, it's so hard to believe that we are actually through the month of January. My gosh, I remember when I was finishing up the season at the end of 2023, and we started to make the change of only going to every other Tuesday. Not that I didn't have amazing guests, but I'm tired. And as you all know, I travel all over the country to make sure that people are educated about children who are in our foster care system. But my next guest, I will have to tell you, I actually stalked him. I stalked him because I really wanted him to be on Fostering Change. And then when I got his book, I will tell you, those of you who have seen this podcast, this is our fifth season. When you see me hold up a book and you see that I have all these little yellow slips, you know how much I love that book. And that is exactly what this book did. I absolutely loved it. I was so lucky that I actually was traveling and I had the time to really read this book and absorb everything in it, which I want everybody to do. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get started. Mark, welcome to Fostering Change.
Rob, thank you so much for having me. And I have to tell you, it was a mutual stalking, man, because I've been following you for years.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Mark, I have to tell you, when I started reading your book, it was so much that it reminded me of my husband and I. Well, we started the journey, over 15 years ago, and seeing what you and your husband were going through, I just felt like, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate emails on this, and I get them all the time. I felt like nothing had changed. Nothing had
Oh,
changed. So I want to dive right in. First of all, I want to know why did you write this?
I just, Rob, I think it's probably similar to you. It's like, we go into these situations and your eyes are just opened. I mean, I really had no idea. I mean, what the system was like, what these children and families experience. And as you start living it day in and day out, you're like, what more can I do? And I just felt like I had a story to tell and it was worth sharing. And so really my hope is obviously that it captures a larger audience than just, those of us in the space. I want families in their day-to-day life to think about what's going on in the house next door. Are those kids safe?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love first of all, I love the fact of the title. And I love the fact that, so many times we think about, are those kids safe? I recently had friends of mine who actually had a child from foster care. They fought for the child, and the child ended up going back to the biological parents. And the 3 months later, they found the child dead.
Oh,
And
God.
and so the reason I bring that up is because, you saying flat out, are they safe? We
Yeah.
see so much in our country that, and by the way, I mean, you're impressive with all that you've done, for the number of Congress people you work for, the amazing, our Hillary Clinton and all of that. But the thing is that I think the problem is that we're not talking about, are the kids safe? Instead, what we're doing is we're pushing and pushing reunification. And I'm not saying that reunification is not what we should be doing, but I think that we're literally turning a blind eye when on reunification, when we're not listening to the foster parents, we're not listening to the guardian of items, we're not listening to the CASA workers. What do you feel about that?
Honestly, I think that was one of the hardest things for me to stomach. I think, and I say this flat out in the book. I'm like, my husband and I are two, successful men, but we're also white men, and we're used to going into a room and having our voice heard. And, unfortunately, there is a disproportionate number of children of color in the system whose parents are of color, and they're not getting their voices heard in so many different so many different avenues that leads to this problem. And I think, for me, it was such an eye-opening experience to be told to, like, show up and shut up sort of thing. And for these families, they're told it all the time. And it breaks your heart. I mean, that really is so much of why I wanted to write this book too, is not just about the foster parents, obviously, it's about the children and the families too.
Yeah, yeah. I love the fact in the book, you're very much like Reese and I, you and your husband, is that, I really wanted my children to never be embarrassed of their story. I
Hmm.
wanted them to know. I wanted them, we're very lucky, out of our five kids that we've adopted in the system, two of our children, we have a relationship with the birth mother. And, you said it. I'll tell you right now, my son and daughter probably should have never, ever been taken from their mother. I mean, it was basically because of the neglect, which they considered that was no more than poverty,
Yeah,
and we see that so
yeah.
much when it comes to kids of color. There's something that I actually highlighted in the book that really caught my eye, and it says, the country allows families to set age ranges like 0 to 3 for the children they are willing to foster, but infants only is an acceptable range. I remember when Reese and I went down to DC Child and Family Services, and we said, okay, we want to adopt and we want to foster, and then they had the range thing, and I said, but I want
Yeah.
a baby. I remember saying, I want a baby. And she looked at me and laughed and said, so does everybody else. We don't allow that. Was that a kind of surprise for you as well?
It was, I mean, I had been around long enough and doing some like work with different nonprofits in the foster care space that I thought I like, had a leg up. Like I could kind of game the system a little bit. I knew the odds, I did my homework. And when they said 0 to 3, I was like, wait, what do you mean? Like that's not what I signed up for. Like, I don't get it. And we talk about, in the story, we had them, they came to our house. And when the social worker had come to our house, she said, you have a big house. Would you consider siblings? And I mean, just to show you my naivety, and you've read this in the book, but I'm like, oh yeah, of course, And what I thought was, if mom has another kid 3 years down the road, can we call you? Like, I thought that's what she was asking,
Yeah.
not there would possibly be three children under, or or two children or whatever it is under the age of three. It blew my mind that that was a possibility, and of course that's what we ended up with was boys who were 10 months apart, or Irish twins as we call them where I'm from.
Yeah, yeah, no, and like I said, I just felt like as I was walking through this book, I literally and I was saying to my husband as I got off the plane, I called him immediately, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to bring this book home for you to read because I'm telling you, these are our brothers." I was like, because it was crazy because we went through the same exact thing. My husband was adamant. If there's a set of siblings, we're game, but we hear these two gay men living in DC.
Yeah.
And little would I know that within a matter of 3 months, we would have four kids, age of 4, and all of them in diapers. It was absolutely crazy. And the thing that I say to people all the time, I, you know, and again, I want everybody to know this book to me is such a resource book. I think that if you are considering, even thinking the word of being a foster parent who you're looking to foster to adopt, and I know I get that hate saying, don't say that, don't say that. Let me tell you something, it is happening. The people are fostering to adopt. And if you are, I'm telling you, you got to get this book. It is a resource book. I think it should be given out to every single person who is considering fostering. I just so much information that you gave us in this book. But the thing that I also took away from this, Mark, is that you know, very similar to what we went through. You did this in the LA area. We went through in the DC area. So, but did you find, which is what we found, the lack of support and the reason that why our foster parents burn out so much because they're not educated enough as they need, and there's just no support.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that you just touched upon there. I mean, I think, first of all, thank you for all of these amazingly kind words. I really appreciate it. It means the world to me. I went to great lengths to do a ton of research on this. I worked with professors from universities. I talked to social workers. I talked to everyone that would have a conversation with me, because I really wanted to make sure that I was putting out there the most current information and the most accurate information and so on. It is going to be on some syllabuses at different schools of social work, which I'm really excited about.
Great.
Um, but as far as the retention of foster parents, I mean, I think you're spot on. I think what I felt, and I talk about this in the book too. I was doing some focus groups with different foster parents and people who had fostered and either were doing it again or were not, and what their issues were with it. And it was really, a lot of them just felt taken for granted. I mean, you've got caseworkers that have too many cases. They're, making last minute appointments, and these foster parents then have to go and like rearrange their schedule at the drop of a hat to be home to make sure that this visit can occur or whatever it might be. And, it's so much on the foster parents. And it's, at the end of the day, it impacts the quality of care in some way.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think a lot of times is what I'm noticing throughout the country as I've spent the last 11 years traveling the country and really, trying to educate people is the biggest problem I see is that, we're not looking in the right places for people to become foster parents. And a good example of that is that, I say this all the time, we've raised our children as Methodists. We
Yeah.
live in a very small, what I call a horse town. There's only houses, there's no townhouses or no apartments. My kids go to
Yeah.
private schools. And I always say to our minister, when is a social worker ever called and asked to come and speak to us about being foster parents?
Right.
They have never. And I've gone to child welfare offices and I've asked
Yeah.
why. And I'm told all the time, well, we don't think people that live on that side of the track really want to be foster parents. And I think that we're doing such a disservice.
Hmm.
Disservice is because once again, that myth that the child is bad,
Right.
that we don't want to put the energy, we don't want to put the love, we don't want to put the safe home because that's a bad kid. What do you feel about that?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think part of it is that we just look in the same places, right? We don't extend our resources to different areas, right? We're not looking at different communities that might be interested in becoming foster parents. I mean, just look at the LGBT community. We're more than two times more likely to be fostering than a same sex couple, I mean, than an opposite sex couple, right? There's so many different things that exploring those communities. But I also think about the children that we had in the book, they actually entered care because they were changed from their parents, and they went into a kinship arrangement with their grandmother, the paternal grandmother, who really had no support around her. She was completely capable of caring for these children. She was a lovely woman, wonderful woman, who owned a small business and everything, but she was alone and she didn't have family support. She didn't have a big community of friends. And I just look at that against us who, they arrived one night, the next morning, we probably had, 30 friends show up that day with gifts and just, and that didn't stop the entire time they were with us. And I just think it's like having that community of support around you is so critical. And right now, they're going to communities where foster parents typically come from. But I think there's a larger audience for this in different areas that we could easily penetrate.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. And it's one of the things I always tell anyone who's ever thinking about being a foster parent. I say the very first thing you should do, find your community. Find your
Yeah,
community because that is
so true.
so important. Because, like, very much like you, we immediately, we had, my in-laws arrive and then friends
Yeah.
arrive, and in fact, having four kids, it was just like I was like, and by the way, I didn't do the diaper thing, so but they, bless my
Oh
husband.
man.
Yeah, didn't do the diaper thing.
Wow.
Bless my husband on that.
I don't know how you got away with that. And you're still
My
married.
we're getting ready to celebrate 19 years, and my husband says to me all the time, he says, the reason I got let you get away with the no diaper thing is because I didn't want to clean up two messes. He was like, so he always reminds me of that. The fact is that, but when I'm reading this book, I'm thinking about how unbelievably lucky my kids are and how unbelievably lucky your kids are. But how many kids out there are not finding that forever family that truly is nourishing them? And did you worry, you and your husband, as you've gotten your children as they're growing, about all the things that we hear about when it comes to the trauma that children in our foster care system are going through?
You know, I did. And I think honestly, that was part of the reason we went with that. We wanted babies, right? We had it in our head that we could somehow spare them of some sort of trauma, abuse, neglect, whatever it might have been. And, the truth is, doesn't really exist. I mean, there's so much stuff that happens from, as soon as in utero, even, Um, but I will say one of the things that we had, and I will credit, I live in Los Angeles, in Los Angeles County. This is a city where there's a therapist on every corner, which is wonderful. And we've had tremendous access to therapy services and so on. And so I really, you know, I'm very grateful to the state of California and the county of Los Angeles for being able to provide that to my children, but also my husband and I too. I mean, we weren't just first time foster parents, we were first time parents. I mean, I didn't even know what a diaper genie was until a friend of mine sent me one in the mail. Yeah. It is. I mean, you must have gone through this too, but it's like, when you have this gestational period and you're expecting a child, like, it's exciting, but the thing is, like, you kind of know what to expect, or everyone in the world who's had a child is telling you, you're going to need to learn how to swaddle, and you're going to need diapers, and this is the size because it's going to be tiny, and this and that, and this formula, or breastfeeding, or whatever it is. For us, like, and I mean, you get a call, and a few hours later there's a bunch of kids at your door. You don't have any of these supplies, and none of the clothes fit, and none of the, I mean, and it's just, and even if you had them, they wouldn't be put away anywhere. Like, where are we going to store the blankets and the diapers, and then, and God forbid you get bottles that don't have matching caps. I mean, that is just a nightmare at 4 a.m. you know
Yeah, yeah, and you are right about that. You write about that in your book, and I love that with the opening line where you write about how you've never experienced the morning sickness and all of the things that mothers go through, as they're preparing to have that child. And all of a
Oh
sudden,
yeah.
I mean, I know for us, it was we got a phone call, and we got a phone call, and they said, in 2 hours, we're coming to your home with two children. And we're just like, okay, this is like, okay, this is really happening. Do you feel, I mean, the fact is you do live in LA. I mean, it is very diverse. It's very, compared, just like when DC, where my husband and I lived. But what we found out 15 years ago when we went to go foster, the fact that we were white, and that we were a same-sex couple, we felt more discriminated against than if it was a single person. Or we had to go through a lot of hoops because of the fact that we were gay. Did you and your husband feel any of that pressure whatsoever?
I have to be honest with you. I don't think we felt that. And I think, when you said it hasn't changed, I'm hoping that that is one of the changes that maybe has existed, because we really didn't feel that. Now, I also recognize that Los Angeles is not a microcosm of the US, but then again, neither is Washington, D.C., right? And so, but they were very welcoming. In fact, we had gone through an incredible nonprofit called Raise a Child, which helps families, find the right agency to work with and so on. I know you've probably had Rich on, and
Yeah,
they're wonderful.
Rich has been my friend for years. I've had him on our podcast. Yeah, he's a great
He's a
guy.
hero. He's a hero and a friend. And anyway, but there's a they had connected us with a couple of different foster family agencies, and it was funny. It was, I mean, they all came to our house. I mean, they were like rolling out the red carpet for us. And now, fast forward several years later, I do so much nonprofit work and advocacy work in the foster care space. Anytime I talk about our story, if there's a social worker in the room who's in, who does the trainings and the recruitment, they always come over to me and they say, whenever there's a same-sex couple that comes in, I always run to them because I know it's a really deliberate decision to be here. Like, you both have to be on board, you can't get pregnant. So, in our case and many other cases, like, surrogacy was an option for us. We could have afforded to do that. We just chose not to. We both have histories with foster care in our family, and it was important to us. you know?
Yeah. And that was like for Reese and I, we had no issue whatsoever, if we to be surrogates, but it was, for
Yeah.
me as a kid who grew up in the system, I just wanted to give a kid a break. Little did I know I would be giving five children. You know, I mean, little would I know that it would be five kids, and for Reese and I just to have adopted our fifth child, and he came in when he was
Wow.
18 is it's crazy. Mark, as we finish up this, if there was one thing that you could, say for a new foster parent,
Hmm.
what would that be?
Oh, I
Besides
think,
read your book.
yeah, that's a great one, but so thank you for that. No, but I think honestly, it is, for people considering it, it's like really go in with your eyes open, do your homework. I mean, there are many things you can do to help that don't involve fostering. I don't think everyone should foster. We need a lot more people, so if it's right for you, please do it. But I think it's, really don't rush to judgment on the families. Like, go in with a lot of empathy in your heart. Recognize that, your life has probably been a whole lot easier than the families that are involved in this system. And, do your best to be empathetic to them. And, the social workers could use some empathy too, because I guarantee they have more caseloads, but also be that squeaky wheel. I mean, this is a child's life at stake, and your job is to keep them safe and make them feel nurtured and loved and give them everything they need during honestly the most challenging time of their life. So do that, and speak up when they need it because
Yeah.
they need it.
I agree. And I've always said this, as foster parents, we are their voice. And,
Hmm.
my husband and I never missed a court hearing. We never allowed a social worker to take our children to the doctor, because
Yeah.
no matter whether they were on the reunification goal or their adoption goal had been
Yeah.
changed, while they were living in our home, they were our children. And the
Yeah.
the biggest thing that I think that we make the biggest mistake within our system is that we immediately think that the birth parents are bad. We
Yeah.
immediately isolate, everyone. And I think the first thing that we should do when a child enters foster care is that every single person should come to the table. I believe that the birth
Yes.
parent should come to the table. I believe the foster parent should come to the table. I believe the guardian ad litems, the CASAs, the social,
Yes.
and they all need to come to the table and they need to sit there and they need to look at those parents and they need to say, what can we do to
Yeah.
get your baby home? What can we do? And by the way, I understand
Yeah.
that we have a percentage of kids. I have two kids who came in with severe abuse, and there was no
Hmm.
way that any judge was ever going to allow these kids
Right.
into there. But there are more children that come in because mom had to leave her 3-year-old with her 12-year-old to go
Yeah.
to work so she could pay for the electricity. These are stories.
Right.
We see them all over our country. And I think that if we came together as a united group and look at
Yes.
the parents and say, listen, what can we do? I mean, Mark, we all know that is why communities were built. Communities were
Absolutely.
built for us to take care of each other. And we have
Yeah.
lost that along the way. So, I tell you right now, this book is definitely, it's going on everybody knows I have a special shelf in the back here. It's going on my special shelf. You know what, everybody? The great thing about it is the book actually is released today. That's exactly right. You're going to be able to click right here. You're going to be able to go and buy the book. But let me tell you something. As someone who has written a book, and I've written several books at this point, the best thing that you could ever do for Mark, the best thing you could ever do for Simon and Schuster, the best thing you could ever do for anyone is to leave a review. Leave a review.
Yes.
Not every one of you are going to like it. And by the way, I've had some of those reviews that kind of cut me a little bit. But we want you to leave the review because leaving the review is truly what's helped moves this book forward. The more reviews,
Absolutely.
the farther the book moves. And that's important to me because this is definitely a book that truly needs to be moved and it needs to be
Yeah.
moved as quickly as possible. Mark, listen, I am so lucky I get to call you my friend. I can't wait to see you very soon. I'm going to
Yes.
get to break bread with you. But everybody, listen. This is just another amazing episode of Fostering Change. I say it all the time. It's my last season, but I can tell you when I have guests like Mark on, when I read amazing books like this, I realize why I do what I do. And what I want you all to do is if you're even thinking about fostering, or maybe you know that person who's been talking to you about it, get this book. Get this book. Really read this book. I'm telling you, it's going to be a book that you probably will read it within less than 2 days, like I did, because it is such an amazing book. Mark, I wish you and the family all the best in the world, and I can't wait to have you back on Fostering Change. And everyone, keep doing what you're doing. Be good humans. Take care, everyone.